Hey guys, I hope you've all have had a wonderful week so far. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump into these discussion questions. So for this first discussion question, one of the first kind of points or topics that I believe answers this discussion question is heterosexism. And the whole idea of heterosexism is on page 373. And the definition of heterosexism is the overarching systems of advantages bestowed on heterosexuals based on the institutionalism of heterosexual norms or standards, and founded on the ideology that all people are or should be heterosexual. So basically, traditionally over time, heterosexualism being heterosexual has been the norm. And therefore, people who are heterosexual oftentimes have privileges where they can be who they want to be without repercussions. And this idea of heterosexism is saying that people who are heterosexual are basically better than those who aren't because they believe that there shouldn't be anything else but heterosexism or heterosexualism. And so people of the LGBTQ population are being extremely marginalized because these other people don't even believe that they should exist or that their way of living should be a thing. They believe that everyone should be heterosexual, and that's completely marginalizing that group. Secondly, there's a clear oppression and liberation frameworks. So the LGBTQ population has, in my opinion, always been on a roller coaster of being oppressed and then having triumphs, and then being oppressed and then having triumphs. Fighting for their rights and then being slandered time and time again. People who classify themselves as LGBTQ were often called sinners, sick, or criminal in the past, and while sexual orientation is something that today has become more open and praised and accepted, especially with the legalization of same-sex marriages, that was huge. There's still forms of oppression today, and a big kind of part of this is the transgender community, how they're being oppressed with the military and all of that that's happening today in today's world. And then lastly, for this discussion question, homophobia is a clear factor of marginalizing this group. Excuse me. So I didn't realize there was 4 different forms of homophobia. And the first, there is personal homophobia, and this is when someone's own belief systems can cause them to be prejudiced to this specific population. And an example of this is that they think that LGBTQ people either deserve to be pitied or powerless or either hated. Pitied as being powerless or hated. Then there is interpersonal homophobia, and this is when someone's beliefs or opinions begin to reflect and impact their relationship with others. This is when the prejudice turns into discrimination at this point. Examples of this can be name-calling or joking in a hurtful manner. Next is institutional homophobia, and this is when ways that the government, businesses, educational, religious, and professional organizations systematically discriminate on the basis of sexual identity. For cultural homophobia, the social norms or codes of behavior that are often followed, not necessarily laws or policies, but socially accepted norms, work to oppress this population. And on pages 381 and 382, the author does go further in depth for you if you wanted to explore these more, because I'm sure there's other people that didn't realize it was broken down this much, like I was. And then this is the second discussion question. So for the second discussion question, I'm starting off with privilege or the lack thereof. While it has been established that individuals have privilege based on certain characteristics or beliefs, or what they look like, the author points out that there is a link between identity privileges on page 392. The author states that our identities are reflective and constitutive of systems of oppression. For example, racism requires white privilege, sexism requires male privilege, and then homophobia requires heterosexual privilege. I thought this was a very interesting point that I wanted to mention, and he also goes on to say that this creates an obligation on the part of those of us who with privileged identities to expose and challenge them. And I agree with this statement, as I was a social work undergrad major, and we were all about advocating for those who didn't have a voice or who just needed that advocacy there for them. And there's actually a list of heterosexual privileges that were extremely interesting to read as well. So you should definitely check that out if you didn't already. And then gender identity is also something that is definitely, I think, confusing to some people, especially now in today's society. For so long, society has been made up of males and females, and now things are changing. On page 427, the author writes that because many people view gender as a presumed natural binary, and those individuals whose experience does not match this assumption are often viewed as unnatural. I'm not going to lie and say that I do not fully know the difference between all of the genders and the ways that people identify as, but something that I hope to work on and research as time goes on, so that I'm not naive in thinking that everyone's the same, because that's just not the case. Lastly, on page 409, the author writes about how their love for girl child toys was a private matter in their home, and that he knew that when they left, they weren't supposed to take dolls out of the home. And I thought this was interesting, that it also states how they switched their gender performance depending on their location, which is an example of marginalization, as this person felt that they had to hide who they were out in public, which is a really sad fact that I'm sure a lot of people experience and actually do, where they don't think they can be who they want to be. That's a sad fact. But that's all I have for you guys. I can't wait to watch your videos and get your different perspectives. Thanks.